The idyllic tranquility of a small Maine town was shattered, forever scarred by an act of unspeakable violence. A young man, a veteran, unleashed a torrent of bullets, leaving behind a trail of devastation and despair. But what drove him to this act? Was he a monster, a cold-blooded killer? Or was he, as his family claims, a victim himself, his mind irrevocably altered by the invisible wounds of war? This is not a story of blame, nor is it an attempt to justify the horrific act. It is a journey into the dark recesses of a mind scarred by combat, a mind grappling with the insidious effects of low-level blasts, a silent enemy that leaves no visible mark but can shatter a man's soul. The shooter, once a bright and promising young man, returned from service a changed person, haunted by invisible wounds that gnawed at his sanity. His family noticed the changes, the withdrawal, the fits of anger, the nightmares that seemed to consume him. They witnessed his descent into a world of paranoia and delusion, a world where the enemy lurked in every shadow, where the threat of violence felt ever present. This was not the young man they knew, the one who had left with dreams of serving his country, the one who had returned a stranger, lost in the labyrinth of his own mind. The impact of low-level blasts on the human brain is a growing concern, a hidden epidemic among veterans of modern warfare. Unlike the visible wounds of war, the shrapnel and bullet wounds, these injuries are insidious, lurking beneath the surface, slowly unraveling the fabric of a person's being. Imagine a shockwave rippling through the brain, disrupting neural pathways, leaving behind microscopic damage that can manifest in myriad ways, explains Dr. Emily Carter, a leading neuroscientist specializing in traumatic brain injuries. These injuries are often invisible to standard medical imaging, making diagnosis difficult and leaving many veterans struggling in silence, their suffering dismissed as PTSD or other psychological disorders. The symptoms can be wide-ranging, adds Dr. Carter, from memory problems and difficulty concentrating to personality changes, impulsivity, and even psychosis. It's like a bomb went off inside their heads, and the shrapnel is slowly tearing them apart from the inside out. The tragedy of these invisible wounds is that they often go unnoticed, misdiagnosed, or even ignored, leaving veterans to grapple with their demons alone, their cries for help lost in the bureaucratic maze of the veterans' healthcare system. The shooter, like countless others, may have been a victim of this silent enemy, his brain irrevocably altered by the invisible scars of war, his actions a tragic consequence of a system that failed to recognize and address his invisible wounds. The transition from the battlefield to civilian life is fraught with challenges, even for those who return physically unscathed. The psychological impact of war, the constant threat of death, the loss of comrades, the moral dilemmas, all leave an indelible mark on a soldier's psyche. For those carrying the invisible wounds of war, the transition becomes even more treacherous, a tightrope walk over an abyss of uncertainty and despair. We trained for combat, for the physical dangers, but no one prepares you for the war within, shares Mark, a veteran who suffered a traumatic brain injury from a roadside bomb in Iraq. You come back home and everything seems different. You're not the same person, but no one can see your wounds. It's like you're living in a nightmare, but everyone else is oblivious. The isolation, the feeling of being misunderstood, the inability to connect with loved ones, all contribute to a sense of alienation and despair. Many veterans turn to alcohol or drugs to numb the pain, to escape the relentless torment of their invisible wounds. The shooter, trapped in his own personal hell, may have reached a point where the pain became unbearable, where the only escape seemed to be through violence, a final desperate act fueled by a mind teetering on the brink of collapse.